Most of my reviews start out with a funny little gag or a gaffe, a little goof, a little fun skit. But today I did want to do a no spoilers review for the first couple minutes of this. It was impossible to do any sort of skit that I thought would be funny and not extremely offensive or somehow come off super misogynist as a joke, since this is mainly marketed as a superhero movie about women empowerment in the media. So there will be a skit later, and it probably is offensive, but at least you won't know that if you just want spoiler free. So if you enjoy this, be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content. I appreciate it very much. Movies are something I cover. More often it's video games. We got comics, collectibles, everything on this channel. The thing with Black Widow, I gotta be honest here, this movie was okay. I like it. I liked it. It's very hard to say I don't like it. I don't really understand leaving the theater and thinking it's a bad movie, but I equally don't understand leaving the theater thinking it's some kind of amazing masterpiece. This is definitely, without giving you spoilers again, I would say on the lower end of the MCU movies for me. It's not Thor the Dark World. It's not Iron Man 2. It's not down there with like the worst of the MCU, even though I still enjoy those, but it's certainly not with the best. And even my wife Jill, who's here with me recording this, kind of thought a lot of the same thing. Just so, for some reason I have to clarify that. So it just doesn't just come with a guy who has male parts between his legs.
I still liked it though. I really liked Yelena and I don't know, a lot of the characters and stuff and a lot of the themes around it, but it was a little bit lackluster and at times boring.
Yeah, I remember you said during the movie actually that you had to go to the bathroom, and later on you told me I was really bored. I had to get up and walk around a little bit. It was very slow, and you just wanted a break, So like, even what I'm saying is my opinion on this, while I do think the marketing around this movie is very ridiculous, and I can talk about that in a bit, it has nothing to do with that. I just think this movie's script is fine. We knew what was going to happen in this movie like a year and a half ago if we wanted to.
It's very predictable.
And yes, and that's the problem, is it's also very predictable. Like, I never read through the leaked script, but if you could predict what was going to happen in this movie, like most of the things that I thought would happen in the movie with just seeing a few clips that they revealed in trailers happened. The villain sucked. Honestly, I think without getting too much into too much, it's actually revealed in the trailers basically that there are two villains in this movie. Neither of them's very good. One's okay. It's a salvageable villain. The other one kind of sucks. So in terms of the MCU's issue with villains that they really used to have, this upholds that tradition, certainly as being a throwback movie. The hero is fun. I thought Red Guardian was great. He's very interesting. His story, which I'll talk about a little more in spoilers, fits in well to different lore, including Captain America's story. So if you watch something like The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think that would benefit this movie, believe it or not, even though this is set years before that. I think that does help parts of the movie, right? Like, there are all kinds of interesting characters that you might care about. I'm not saying you do, but you might. Like, if you have questions like, how did Black Widow get the way she is? What happened to the other Black Widows that we see in things like the Age of Ultron flashback? Who was her original family? Things like that. You're going to want to watch this movie. It does add those different things in, but if you've seen Endgame, which this is an Endgame spoiler, obviously, it's hard to care a ton about this movie in retrospect because you know how everything ends. You know that this character is gone in the future. This movie seems more set up to push the future of the MCU by capitalizing on its past with Black Widow than it did to celebrate Black Widow. Like, I thought going into this was going to be like a really badass big Black Widow movie. I love Scarlett Johansson as an actress. I think she's awesome. Like, I think she's really cool. I think she does a good job. I poke fun at some of her statements in the marketing a lot because I think they're dumb, and I think she's trying really hard to be woke or politically correct or whatever you want to call it to not get in trouble, especially after her statements about like being able to play people of any race or sexual orientation or whatever, getting her in trouble a few years ago. And she's been like canceled or whatever you want to call it a few times. I don't like a lot of her opinions that she's trying to push outside of this movie onto it, but I still wanted to see a celebration of her as an actress and of this character, right? That's what I wanted to see. But I really feel like overall the other characters around her stole the show and were more interesting. Red Guardian, more interesting. Like, he has lines that allude to the past of the MCU that made me think, I'd rather be watching that. I'd rather be watching that movie about what he's talking about. Or, Black Widow's sister, Yelena. I thought that she was very interesting. Or even her mom. There's characters in this movie that you think, oh, they're introducing a lot of nuggets from the past on here. It'd be much more interesting to see those things than to just see this. This reminded me very much of a early MCU movie in terms of its villain issue, and it was very much focused on like a world domination / political plot versus something otherworldly or mystical or very interesting to the audience. And that's not a bad thing per se. Like me, for example, I loved The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That was almost entirely based on political stuff and racial issues and all this stuff, right? I actually loved that show. I think it did a good job of handling it. I know some people don't like how it did. I loved it. I thought it did a really good job. But the few times this movie tries to push anything that they act like it pushed in terms of a message, it's very forced. And most of the time it just seems unfocused, like Diet James Bond. I don't really see why this came out when it did, and I think it was a missed opportunity to not do this earlier on where people would have cared more. I do want to hear what Jill has to say before we leave the spoiler-free section, because I think that's about all I got.
I was going to say that I thought the movie would have been much more impactful had it come out after Civil War, like when it was supposed to. And I do think Yelena in particular is a very likable character, and if anything, watching her in this movie will make you more excited for the future of the MCU, simply because I assume she's going to be in it, and I really liked her character a lot. Other than that, I don't really see a big point in watching this movie. You're not really missing anything, and it's not really alluding to anything too major happening in the future except for one end scene.
Well, and I will throw in before we go into spoilers too that I will make a joke about this in our little skit, but I do think that one thing that I find disappointing was the lack of femininity in this movie. That's going to sound very odd, but what I mean by that is one of the things that's cool about Black Widow is that she's a girl. Now, I'm not saying that in terms of like, oh, look, a superhero with boobs. That's not my point. But like Black Widow in the comics, right? And even earlier on in the MCU, she's this character who uses her charm. Part of that is how she looks and her personality and this kind of flirtatious attitude and charisma to get around, to get things done. It's very much like what James Bond does. Now, people look at James Bond, I think, and I'm not going to go on a big preachy rant here, but people look at James Bond and I think that the worst they think is that's a little misogynistic. He uses women to get what he wants and to get further in his career and blah, 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 blah. But with Black Widow, the whole point of that was almost like taking that power back. The way that they acted in the promotions for this movie was very odd in terms of like, it's not going to have any of that. And it's very much about women empowerment. But if she was switched out for just a generic man, it would have made no difference in this story, It didn't really feel like a celebration of a female superhero at all, and it didn't seem at all focused on that character.
It didn't seem at all focused on empowering the charm and beauty that women have spent so long fighting for in terms of being able to be on the big screen and being able to show off who they are, whether that be sexually or not.
No, I agree with you. I think that it tries to avoid anything about women while randomly being weirdly focused on it in a few lines of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, without getting into spoilers, again, there's like a weird period joke at a very odd time, which I don't find offensive or gross at all. Most men don't care about that. Most men have either had relations with multiple women and they know what a period is, or they have been with one and they know what a period is. So they acted like that was gross.
Or they went to health class.
Yeah, that too. But they acted like that was gross, which was weird in terms of them pretending that this was like a celebration of like female movies.
Yeah, because you shouldn't be talking about how periods are gross in terms of a movie trying to be empowering to women, because periods aren't gross. They're a natural part of life.
And it might sound funny because I'm not a big like social justice warrior or anything like that. But I wanted this movie to celebrate those elements of Black Widow. Like, Black Widow is multifaceted, and in this, it just kind of seemed like they tried to make her more James Bond light again, and that's it. I just don't really understand why they moved away from the core comic book aspects of her character, and I thought it was disappointing. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm going to do the skit and the spoiler section of the review now. Well, Black Widow, I will tell you my entire plan as I sit here on this computer, managing the one resource the world has too much of. Girls! Oh, misogyny is funny. Yeah, quick, make a joke about your period. I think it would be pretty funny. It's pretty fitting right now. Just go ahead, come on. You misogynist pig! I'm going to take you down once and for all womankind. By the way, have you seen the interviews about this movie? This is a Me Too movie, and I've got to be honest, generic bad guy who's possibly Russian, time is up. I have made millions of dollars in my career off of my body and my looks, but now I'm angry, and I've got to be honest with you. This is not about my looks or my form-fitting clothing that I'm still wearing in this movie. No, this is about me stopping you, an evil man, who happens to be white, by the way, for all of womankind. In terms of spoilers, there is a lot that can be said about this movie. I'm going to try and keep it brief. The thing is, the story is fine. Like I said, the story does probably suffer a little bit, though, from the rating, because looking at this overall, this is a PG-13 movie. I did not expect it to be R, but this movie deals heavily with themes of human trafficking and the like, which was odd to see because it deals with that and mental conditioning and a lot of dark stuff, right? But it does so in a PG-13 movie without really going into it at all. And it's possible to tackle some dark themes like this in a PG-13 movie. Again, I know I use the example of Bond a lot. Bond pushes PG-13 for what it is all the time. You know, half of those movies are probably pretty close to R when it comes to James Bond. But with this movie, where it clearly took some inspiration from those types of movies, it didn't seem like they were willing to actually go all the way with explaining Black Widow's backstory, explaining these tragic elements of her character
and the intense traumas she went through.
Yeah, they just very lightly touch on it, which is weird because a lot of it is built up as building up this character, as going into her background, but we don't get to see much of that in terms of the story. When it comes to the villain himself, I guess, or herself, since we're in spoilers, this is not Taskmaster. This is not Taskmaster at all. Taskmaster in the comics is, one, generally a man, and two, more of like a mercenary type. He is, I'm trying to think of how to say it, he is a personal greed character. He's driven by personal motivations, and while he can be fairly generic, he's also very interesting. Imagine a character, you know, that can go head to head with Captain America. He has like a similar shield. He can shoot like Hawkeye can. This is a very interesting character, and even though they allude to this in the movie about how, oh, this character can fight just like your friends, they never really do. This character doesn't do much like Hawkeye or like Iron Man or Captain America or anyone. The character throws the shield, shoots an arrow a couple of times, and fights Black Widow a couple of times just the same way that she fights, and that's it.
The fights were a little bit lame.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is those action sequences were pretty lackluster and boring, which is weird because when Black Widow was first introduced in Iron Man 2, she was very athletic. Yes, she was a little younger, but she was extremely athletic and she can move around very, very well. We don't really see a lot of that in this movie at all. I mean, it's just disappointing. Like, I don't really know how else to say it when it comes to this movie. Was it bad? No, not at all. But between the okay story, the generic Taskmaster reveal of it actually being the other dude's daughter, the generic villain, who I honestly can't even remember his name, and I saw this movie last night.
I think his name was Borkov?
Or Borlov or something. I don't know. I can't remember his name at all. Like, that's how little he mattered. There's no stakes to this movie. We know exactly what happens to Black Widow in the end, in terms of in the future. And the only purpose to this is to build up Yelena, I think. It's to build up her sister. I don't really see a purpose to it in terms of building up Black Widow at all. There's no point to even do so. She's already dead.
I think it would have been much more interesting and much more character building if they had shown what went on, what happened to Natasha and what happened to Yelena in the Red Room when they were young girls to teenagers. I wanted to see more of those younger actresses and more of what they went through, and I think that would have made the story much more impactful. I think it would have made the villain much more evil feeling and much more memorable, and it would have made the stakes of the movie feel a lot higher to me had I seen things that would have I don't know, shaken me a little bit to my core as a young woman, because I wouldn't want something like that to happen to me.
Right, but instead it's just alluded to. It's pretty much like X-Men Origins Wolverine, where you jump through that storyline in about 2 or 3 minutes of pre-movie credits. They show the events leading up to it, then they show a quick montage, and then all of a sudden we're to modern day. They just did nothing with it.
Yeah, and that feels a little, I don't know, I guess it might sound silly to say it sounds a little disrespectful to the character.
Well, it's just boring in general, even if it wasn't, because what's weird is they built this up like it was going to be this big tribute to Black Widow.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was going to be a big story. And really all it is a shoved in post-Civil War story. I'm not actually against adding movies into the MCU where they fit. This is right after Civil War, but it felt so forced to be there.
I was hoping for more of an origin story.
Oh yeah, you didn't get that at all.
No.
Maybe Yelena's origin.
A little
but
bit.
That's it. And the thing is, when you look at it from the standpoint of the MCU timeline, all it is just a shoved in Civil War sequel, kind of. But there's a lot of things that don't even make any sense. Like, for example, there were all these pushes and I guess rumors about Tony Stark showing up and all this stuff, right? This didn't really happen at all. What we did get to see was Ross. No one cares. Like, Ross was here. Cool. He was just enforcing the Sokovian Accords and going after Black Widow. Awesome. He shows up a couple times throughout the movie. Doesn't matter at all. Doesn't add to his character. Doesn't add to Black Widow's character. Does nothing for the overall universe except tell us what we already knew was happening.
I did think it was funny they tried to tie in her randomly going blonde like halfway through the Avengers movies by showing a L'Oreal blonde hair dye box in her little RV, and then at the end of the movie she's just randomly blonde for one scene.
Yeah, they showed her be blonde. Well, they showed the transition to her becoming blonde and having that vest as well that she got from her sister, because the vest that she's wearing at the end of the movie is also the one she's wearing at the beginning of Infinity War when the secret Avengers are operating and
It kind of seemed like they wrote that in later, though.
Well, yeah, it was just very obviously thrown in there.
Yeah.
A lot of this was thrown in there. The problem with the spoiler section of this review is the movie was so fine. Like, there was nothing awful about it, right? But there was also nothing great about it.
Yeah, it was just mediocre.
It was just an okay movie. I mean, it's probably in the lower tier of MCU movies, like I said before. The story kind of sucked. It was okay. And I'm excited to see more of Yelena. Like, she was what I wanted from Black Widow. Like, this gorgeous, really tough as nails girl who shows more emotion as well.
Yes, this athletic woman too who can kind of do anything.
Well, and she's also capable of like covering it up as well. We don't get to see a lot of emotion from Scarlett Johansson in this movie at all that isn't fake.
No, she pulled a Kristen Stewart or whatever her name is.
Yeah, like it was all just fake. The only time that we saw her acting emotional was when she was faking it to get the villain to monologue again, which is something we've already seen a couple of times. So there's nothing really new to that either. I don't know, overall, it's odd to say that her sister's role in this movie is more interesting than hers. Her family, like the Red Guardian, ended up being more interesting.
Yeah, Yelena really stole the show, and so did her dad, Red Guardian.
Yeah, and I will say with Red Guardian, too, one thing I'm interested to see is if they ever do anything with him in the past. Because I know this was shoved in here, but there were several lines in this movie relating back in the MCU to him fighting Captain America, but it would have been during a time when Steve was frozen in ice. Meaning that if that happened, he was likely fighting Isaiah Bradley, which would have been the Captain America that would have lined up more with the Cold War timeline or time period in the MCU. So I think that would be really cool to see. And it's obviously not just a throwaway line, because we also did have Madame Hydra's inclusion, Valentina, I think that's her first name, her inclusion in this. So there are connections with this and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Overall, I'm disappointed. I like the movie. I don't hate it. There's not a lot to say for spoilers beyond what we did.
You could mention how Valentina shows Yelena at the end of the movie in the end credit scene while she's standing at Black Widow's grave, this picture of Hawkeye, and says, "This is who killed your sister. You should go after him."
Yeah, that was stupid.
It was a little stupid, but it kind of set up at least a somewhat kind of interesting future for the MCU.
But you pointed out that this movie almost seems like it was designed just to tease a future project with Yelena.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's it.
It was to just build up Yelena.
That's not a Black Widow movie, though, then.
No, it was a Yelena movie.
If I make a movie completely, and this is, I don't know, if I make a movie completely and I call it Black Panther, but the whole point of the movie is to set up a movie about Winter Soldier, that's not really a Black Panther movie. That's just a movie to set up Winter Soldier. And I get that they do that all the time with their movies, right? They are always setting up sequels with them. But the whole point of this movie seems to drive home, hey, this is how her and her sister reconnected. This is why her sister will be probably in the Hawkeye show. And then why she'll probably be in the Thunderbolts project or whatever with John Walker and Baron Zemo, most likely. That's my assumption. So I don't really think that that was a good way to go. If you wanted to work that in here, I think it should have been done more organically. I'm excited to see what happens with Yelena. She's the part I probably cared about the most in this, other than Red Guardian, but it doesn't come across to me as a Black Widow movie, really at all. Jill, do you have anything else to say before we wrap it up, or should we do a different clip?
Yelena was really hot.
She was really hot, but you can't say that because that is objectifying women, and women can't be beautiful. They either need to be really, really masculine, or they have to be a bimbo. That's all it is. Like, they have to be a one-dimensional creature, and that's the way of looking at women progressively. So we know if you're a woman, you might as well just deform your face, because otherwise that's all you'll be judged as for the rest of your life. Thank you very much, Scarlett Johansson. Very cool. So overall, like I said, a little disappointed. I still like it. Not the worst, not the best. It's just an average MCU movie in terms of good to bad. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm interested to hear your takes. There are certain things I hated around this movie, like the marketing and some of the pushes like leading up to the movie I thought were just completely stupid. They don't really fit the tone of the movie itself at all. They just seem very like, please God, don't cancel me type things. But other than that, there's really nothing I hate about this. Even Taskmaster, yeah, it was like a bastardized version, but it was just so mediocre that I didn't really even care. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Maybe you cared more than me. Maybe you loved this. Maybe you hated it. Let me know in those comments down below. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. I appreciate you very much. And check out everything down below, including our secondary channel and my wonderful wife's Etsy shop, where she's making a wide variety of things. If you want to see something that actually benefits young girls, that shop. She makes it with a lot of different products in mind for women and men, so I appreciate you checking that out. It goes directly to support the channel. And Jill, you have anything to say before we wrap it up?
I actually have something new on my shop, and it's a French barrette, or just a normal hair clip, but it's called a French barrette because you like squeeze it to open it. But it has angel wings on it and pretty flowers, and I can make it whatever color you want. And that's up on my Etsy shop right now, and I'm really proud of it. So you guys should go check that out.
I am also proud of it. We'll see you in the next one. Have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shway.